Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I am working on a LANGWARM blanket. Now in Scotland, LANGWARM just means long and warm, and I am going to show you how to do, and I'm going to show you how quickly, it'll be a quick video, how to make a granny blanket as a rectangle. If you get a measuring tape and if you want it for your bed, measure the length or half the length of your bed, half the length or half the width of your bed. This is going to be for a single bed, and by the time I've got it finished, it's going to be big enough to go from the top, drape over the bottom and drape over the sides. So do your chain half the length that you want your blanket to be. If you're doing it as a little car blanket and you want to do it as 10, then do it as 10, and you'll work your rounds until you get to 20, and that'll give you the size and the width that you need, because this is so versatile. So I'm going to show you how to do a LANGWARM blanket. You can do it, you can make it any size that you want, but do your chain to half the length or width that you want, and then you'll work around and you should get the size that you need, or just continue like I have until it's as big as you want it, and then you'll have no problem at all. It's done as a granny stitch. That's the other side of it. That's the other side. That's the other side. So I'll show you how to quickly do this if you want a LANGWARM blanket or a big long warm blanket. I've already made a scarf like this, and then I cottoned on and I thought, do you know, I could do that as a rectangle blanket. So I started another one, and the one for the scarf will be on my channel soon. But look at this, you can do this any length that you want it to be and work your way around and turn it into a big blanket. And I'm going to show you how to do it. It's really, really easy. Once you get the first section done, I've done this in a smaller sample. I'll show you how to do it in a smaller sample. It works the same way for this. You just do your chain in sets of 3 to the length that you want your blanket to be, whether it's for a bed like this one, a little cot size like this one. It will go up and down the way. Your blanket will go up and down like this. It won't go across. It will go up and down because it'll get wider at the corners and wider as you work it like this one. So I'm going to do a sample. Now you'll do your chain in sets of 3, and sets of 3. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So that's long enough for a sample. I'm going to add an extra stitch. Now into the 4th stitch, count 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to put 2 more UK treble crochets. If you're in the USA, these are double crochets for you. So I'm going to put a cluster in to that stitch. I'm going to chain 2, 1, 2, and put another cluster in there. 1, 2, and 3. Now I've made myself a corner. I've made a corner in that stitch. Skip 2, 1, 2, and do 1 cluster into the next stitch. 1, 2, and 3. Skip 2, 1, 2, and put another cluster all the way along. 1, 2, and 3. Skip 2, 1, 2, and do one more cluster. Do that all the way along your length. So I'm on the last cluster along. So I've got 3 stitches left, and I'm going to build a corner in the last stitch. I'm going to put 1 cluster into this last stitch. So that's 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to chain 2, 1, 2. Now into the same stitch, put 1 more cluster. I'm building a corner in this last stitch. 2 and 3. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move to the space. We're going to work down your length. So I'm going to move into the space and put 1 cluster in that space. I'm going to pull my little tail end in as well. So into the next space, I'm going to put a cluster all the way along. 1 cluster into these spaces. I'm going to trim the tail end. So in the spaces in between your clusters. So these are the chain 2 spaces that we skipped. We skipped 2 chains when we did this cluster on this side. And this is where we're putting these clusters in the space. I'll put my last one in. And into that chain of 3 that we started with, I'm going to slip stitch. I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and turn my work around. Now I'm going back into that space. We're going to put a cluster into each of the spaces along, and then we'll put 2 corners in at the end. I'll show you that. So we're going to leave this corner just now. That's my corner there. So into that space, put 2 more stitches to build a cluster. 1 and 2. Into the space, put another cluster all along. So I'm near the end. I've got a space here. I'm going to put 1 cluster into that space. Now this was my corner. This was the one on the end. In here where this chain 2 space is, we're going to put 2 corners. So I'm going to put 1 cluster first, put 1 cluster in, 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to chain 2, 1, 2, and back in there I'm going to put another cluster. So that's me done 1 corner. So what I'm going to do is in the same chain space, I'm going to do another corner. So put another cluster, 1, 2, and 3, chain 2, 1, 2, and put 1 more cluster in. So that's me got 2 corners in this end. So then you'll have your corners to work in to each corner. So 1 into each space all the way along to the other side. So I've done my last cluster and I'm at this point, and this is where I'm going to put the 2 corners again into this end. And that lets you make a rectangle blanket like this any width you want. And you can make great big rectangle blankets. And this is the other one that I've been working on. Now you can turn these into straps, blankets, whatever you want. This nice big long one is going to be a really long blanket. And you just keep going around and around and into your corners. You'll get more and more spaces in between your corners. You'll just work around and around until you get the blanket size that you want, and then you'll just stop. So I'm at this corner, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 1 cluster into this chain of 2, chain 2, 1, 2, and into that cluster, into that chain space, 1 more cluster, so that's my first corner of this side done. So into that same space, put 1 more cluster, 1, that's 3 stitches, 2 and 3, chain 2, 1, 2, I'm going to build my last corner to keep my edges straight. So I've got my 2 corners on this side. Put a corner in here, you'll put a cluster in the middle of these 2 clusters and a corner in here, and then continue as wide as you want it to be. So I'm going to slip stitch to the top of my chain of 3, and that'll finish this round. You'll chain 3 and turn, and then into that space you'll put another cluster. And that is how you'll do these rectangle blankets. Now into my first chain of 2 here, I've got my chain 2 here, we'll put 1 corner, so that's 1 cluster, 2 chain and 1 cluster. So 2 chain and 1 more cluster into this corner. Now in between these 2 clusters that are on the end, I'm going to put 1 cluster in there. In between those 2. And then move to my next corner and build another corner. 1, 2, put 1 cluster, 2 chain, 1, 2, and 1 more cluster into the corner. And that gives you your 2 corners and your 2 chain. You've got your spaces here for your next clusters, and you'll work along. So 1 cluster into each space. And that's how you make a rectangle granny stitch blanket. You'll just keep going around and around. So in this corner, you'll put one corner in here. In the middle here, you'll put one cluster, and then in that corner, you'll build another corner. And once you've got that round on, you can clearly see where your spaces are. I'll get my larger one. So that's how easy it is to do this as a rectangle. It is really easy to do a rectangle granny stitch. That noise is Muttley just jumping off his chair. He's got an office chair the same as me so that he can sit on it. He's got a little bed, but he doesn't seem to like it as that much anymore. He just likes to jump up on his chair. So what you'll do is you'll just continue in that pattern that I've shown you, and you'll go around and around. Now remember, and do your chain in sets of 3 and do it to the length, half the length of what you blanket to be, or your project. And as you work around, it will grow in length, because when you do your corners, that's you add in an extra stitch to the width and an extra stitch either end to the length, because as you saw when I showed you how to do it, it was getting bigger and bigger. So when you do your corners, you can see down here we had no spaces, and then I had one space in between, then I had 2, then I had 3. Now on this row I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces in between my corners. So as it grows, your blanket will get wider as well, and it'll get longer too every round you do, and do as many rounds as you want. And you're really going to enjoy making a Scottish LANGWARM blanket in a granny stitch. So thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. If you subscribe to the channel, it's completely free. You don't have to pay for it, and it allows you to leave comments on YouTubers' channels. And if you click on the bell icon, YouTube will tell you when I put up another tutorial. So until the next time, happy crafting, and I'll see you all again soon. Goodbye.